The discovery that changed everything. Captain Sarah Chen never expected her routine patrol to make history. Her ship, the Wanderer, was just another human scout vessel mapping the outer edges of known space. Earth had been part of the Galactic Council for only 50 years, and humans were still considered the new kids among the stars. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," called out Lieutenant Torres from his sensor station. His voice carried an edge that made Sarah look up from her morning coffee. "Define strange, Torres." "It's big. Really big. And old. The readings are off the charts." Sarah moved to the main display. What she saw made her heart skip a beat. 3 massive structures floated in the void, each one larger than Earth's moon. They were perfect spheres, made of some dark material that seemed to swallow light itself. But that wasn't the strangest part. "Captain," whispered Engineer Park from across the bridge, "those things, they're moving in perfect formation, like they're alive." The 3 spheres rotated slowly around each other in an ancient dance. No ships this large should be able to move so smoothly. No known technology could build something like this. And according to their scans, these things were millions of years old. "Get me a channel to Earth Command," Sarah ordered. Priority Alpha. Within hours, the news spread across human space like wildfire. The discovery was so important that every major power sent their best ships to investigate. The Galactic Council wasn't far behind. Admiral Hassan arrived first in the massive Earth battleship Defiance. He was a tough old soldier who had fought in 3 wars, but even he looked nervous as he studied the alien structures. "Any idea what they are, Captain Chen?" he asked during their first meeting. "No, sir. But they're definitely not natural. The way they move, the energy readings. Something built these things. Something incredibly advanced. More advanced than the Council races." Sarah nodded grimly. "Much more advanced. These make our best ships look like toys." The Council arrived within the week. The proud Zalathi came in their crystal ships. The warlike Korthak brought their battle fleet. The wise Etherians sent their science vessels. All the major powers of the galaxy gathered around the 3 mysterious spheres. But it was the reaction of the Council, races that truly shocked the humans. "By the 7 suns," breathed High Councillor Vexhai of the Zalathi. His normally calm demeanor cracked as he stared at the display. "It cannot be. The Great 3 were just legends." "What are the Great 3? Admiral Hassan demanded. The alien leaders exchanged worried looks. Finally, Elder Thok of the Korthak spoke. "Old stories. Myths passed down for 10,000 years. They speak of 3 ancient guardians who once ruled the galaxy, ships so powerful they could destroy stars with a thought. Being so advanced they were like gods to the rest of us." "You're saying these are those ships?" Sarah asked. "If the legends are true," said Etherian Sage Luminos, "then these are the most dangerous objects in the galaxy. The stories say they were sealed away after a great war, locked in sleep until someone was worthy enough to awaken them." Admiral Hassan frowned. "And you think someone just woke them up?" "No," said Vexhai quietly. "We think they woke themselves up. The question is why. And why now?" As if responding to their words, the 3 spheres suddenly stopped their ancient dance. They hung motionless in space for a long moment. Then, without warning, they began to glow. The glow started as a soft pulse, barely visible. But it grew stronger and brighter until the spheres blazed like 3 new stars. Energy readings spiked off every scale. The combined fleet of dozens of ships suddenly felt very small and fragile. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump," ordered Admiral Hassan. "If those things are hostile," he never finished the sentence. 3 beams of pure light shot out from the spheres, not at the ships but into empty space. The beams carved through reality itself, opening 3 massive portals that shouldn't exist. And through those portals came a voice. It spoke in no language anyone recognized, yet every being present understood it perfectly. The words bypassed their ears and spoke directly to their minds. "The chosen have arrived. The time of testing begins." The voice was ancient beyond measure. It had watched civilizations rise and fall. It had seen the birth and death of stars, and now it was looking directly at them. "Which among you will prove worthy? Which race has evolved beyond their primitive nature? Step forward and be judged." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. This wasn't first contact. This was an examination, and somehow she knew that failing this test would mean the end of everything. The Great Three had awakened after millions of years of sleep. They were looking for something, or someone, and every ship in the fleet was about to discover what happened to those who disappointed gods. The test of worthiness, the silence that followed the ancient voice, was deafening. Dozens of ships from across the galaxy hung motionless, their crews paralyzed by the weight of what they'd just heard. The Great Three pulsed with patient energy, waiting for an answer. Admiral Hassan was the first to break the spell. All human vessels hold position. Do not make any aggressive moves. But the Korthak had different ideas. War Chief Gromax, commanding their largest battle cruiser, powered up his weapons. We are Korthak. We bow to no one. If these ancient things want a fight, we'll give them one. Gromax, no! Shouted Elder Thok, but it was too late. The Korthak battle cruiser, a ship that could level cities, opened fire with everything it had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and quantum torpedoes all struck the nearest sphere at once. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The sphere didn't even notice. The weapons simply disappeared when they touched its surface. Not deflected or absorbed, they just ceased to exist. The sphere pulsed once, almost like it was sighing in disappointment. What happened next made everyone's blood run cold. The sphere turned toward the Korthak ship. For just a moment it focused its attention on the vessel and its crew of 3,000 warriors. There was no visible beam, no explosion, no drama at all. The battlecruiser simply wasn't there anymore. 3,000 of the galaxy's fiercest warriors had been erased from existence in the blink of an eye. Not destroyed, erased, as if they had never been at all. By the ancestors, whispered War Chief Bromax from another Korthak vessel. What kind of power is this? The ancient voice spoke again, somehow conveying vast disappointment. Still they choose violence as their first response. After all these eons, so little has changed. Sarah found herself stepping forward on her bridge. Something about the voice, about this whole situation, felt wrong. These beings were testing them, yes, but for what? And why did she get the feeling they wanted to be disappointed? Torres, she said quietly, scan the spheres again. Look for any kind of pattern in their energy signatures. Captain, just do it. Something's not right here. While Torres worked, the council leaders tried to salvage the situation. High Counselor Vexhai activated a wide communication channel. Great ones, he said, his voice formal and respectful. We apologize for the actions of one misguided ship. The Korthak acted without the consent of the council. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and understanding. Peace, the voice mused. Understanding, pretty words, but what are your actions? A test. Sarah realized they were being put through some kind of trial. But what kind of test involved erasing ships from existence? Captain, Torres whispered urgently, I found something. The energy patterns, they're not random. It's like a signature. And Captain, I've seen something like this before. Where? The ancient ruins on Kepler 442b, the ones the archaeologists couldn't explain. The energy residue matches. Sarah's mind raced. The ruins on Kepler 442b were old, millions of years old. But they weren't built by any known species. The structures were too advanced, too strange, and they'd all been destroyed in some massive conflict. Torres, what if these aren't the good guys? The young officer looked confused. Ma'am, think about it. They call themselves Guardians, but they just murdered 3,000 beings without blinking. They talk about testing worthiness, but they seem to want us to fail. What if the Great Three aren't the heroes of those old legends? Captain Chen, Admiral Hassan's voice crackled over the comm. What's your ship's status? Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Admiral, I need to speak with all fleet commanders immediately. Emergency channel. There's something we need to discuss. Within minutes, the leaders of every major fleet were linked in a secure communication network. Sarah looked at the faces of humans, Zelathi, Korthak, Etherians, and a dozen other species. I think we're looking at this wrong, she said. Everyone assumes these are the good guys because they're ancient and powerful. But what if they're not? What if they're the reason the galaxy's older civilizations disappeared? Elder Thok growled his displeasure. The legends speak of the Great Three as protectors. Written by whom? Sarah challenged. The civilizations that survived. What about the ones that didn't? What about the ones that failed their tests? Etherian Sage Luminos tilted his glowing head thoughtfully. An interesting theory. The ruins we found on dead worlds. They always show signs of sudden, complete destruction. Exactly. What if the Great Three aren't testing us to see if we're worthy of their help? What if they're testing us to see if we're a threat to them? Admiral Hassan's eyes widened with understanding. And if we fail their test, we end up like every other advanced civilization that's disappeared over the past 1,000,000 years. The truth hit them all at once. The Great Three weren't guardians, they were gardeners. They had been pruning the galaxy for eons, cutting down any species that grew too advanced, too powerful, too threatening to their rule. Humanity and the council races had just attracted the attention of the galaxy's oldest and most dangerous predators. So what do? Asked High Councillor Vex-High. Sarah looked at the three massive spheres, still pulsing with patient energy. They were waiting for the next part of their test, waiting to see if these upstart younger races would prove themselves worthy of continued existence. We do something they're not expecting, Sarah said grimly. We pass their test, but not the way they want us to. The Great Three had been the masters of the galaxy for millions of years. They had destroyed countless civilizations and convinced themselves it was for the greater good. They expected fear, submission, or hopeless defiance. They weren't prepared for what humanity was about to give them, the one thing that had never occurred to beings who thought of themselves as gods. A fair fight. The alliance of the desperate. The plan was insane. Sarah knew it, Admiral Hassan knew it, and every commander in the combined fleet knew it. But insane was better than extinct. Let me get this straight, said War Chief Bromax, his scarred face twisted in disbelief. You want us to work together? Humans, Korthak, Zalathi, Etherians, all of us. That's exactly what I'm saying, Sarah replied. The emergency meeting was taking place aboard Admiral Hassan's flagship, with holographic representatives from every major fleet. Look at our history. Every time our species meet, we fight. We compete. We try to prove we're better than each other. Because we are better, snarled another Korthak commander. Are we? Sarah challenged. Better than beings who can erase battleships from existence? Better than entities that have been culling advanced civilizations for millions of years? The room fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. High Councillor Vex-High spoke carefully. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Chen? The Great Three expect us to behave like every other species they've encountered. They expect us to fight among ourselves, to submit to their power, or to make futile attacks against their superior technology. What they don't expect is for natural enemies to become allies. Elder Thok leaned forward. You think cooperation might impress them? No, Sarah said firmly. I think cooperation might give us a chance to survive them. She activated the main display, showing detailed scans of the three spheres. Look at their formation. Perfect coordination. They've been working together for millions of years. That's their strength, but it might also be their weakness. Engineer Park, who had been studying the data, stood up. Captain's right. Their energy patterns are linked. They're not three separate ships. They're three parts of one system, like a giant machine, which means, asked Admiral Hassan, which means if we can disrupt that link, even for a moment, they might be vulnerable. Etherian Sage Luminos brightened with understanding. A coordinated attack, not against their hulls, which we cannot damage, but against the energy connections between them. Exactly. But it would require perfect timing and cooperation between all our fleets. Humans, Korthak, Zalathi, Etherians, everyone working together like we've never done before. War Chief Bromax laughed bitterly. Impossible. We can barely be in the same system without shooting at each other. Then we learn, Sarah said simply. Or we die. The ancient voice interrupted their planning. Your time grows short. Choose your champion. Choose the one who will speak for all. Every eye in the room turned to look at someone else. The Korthak wanted their strongest warrior. The Zalathi favored their wisest philosopher. The Etherians chose their most evolved sage. But it was Admiral Hassan who spoke up. Captain Chen, he said quietly, you figured this out. You brought us together. You should be the one. Sir, I'm just a patrol captain. You're the reason we have a plan instead of panic. You're the reason we're talking instead of fighting. If anyone can face these things, it's you. One by one, the other commanders nodded agreement. Even War Chief Bromax gave his consent. The human female has courage. She will speak for all of us. Sarah felt the weight of an entire galaxy settling on her shoulders. Billions of lives depended on what happened next. "All right," she said, taking a deep breath. "Here's what we're going to do." The plan was complex but elegant. Each fleet would position itself at specific coordinates around the three spheres. When Sarah gave the signal, they would fire simultaneously, not at the spheres themselves, but at the empty space between them where the energy connections were strongest. The weapons wouldn't destroy the Great Three, but they might disrupt their link long enough to prove that the younger races could work together. It was a message. We're not like the others you've destroyed. We're something new. Remember, Sarah broadcast to all ships as they moved into position, this isn't about winning a fight. It's about showing them we've evolved beyond what they expect. We're not just individual species competing for resources. We're a community, a family. The fleet spread out in perfect formation. Korthak battle cruisers took the heavy positions. Zalathi science vessels calculated targeting solutions. Etherian ships provided energy coordination. And human vessels filled the gaps, the glue that held the alliance together. "All ships report ready," announced Torres from the Wanderer's sensor station. Sarah opened a channel to the Great Three. "Ancient Ones," she said, her voice carrying across space, "we've chosen our champion. I am Captain Sarah Chen of Earth, and I speak for all the free races of this galaxy. One so young, so insignificant. What makes you think you can stand before us?" "Because I'm not standing alone." Sarah gave the signal. Every ship in the combined fleet fired at once. Hundreds of weapons discharged in perfect synchronization, their beams converging on the energy patterns that connected the three spheres. For just a moment the ancient dance was interrupted. The Great Three shuddered. Their perfect formation wavered, and for the first time in millions of years, they felt something they had almost forgotten. Surprise. Impossible. The voice thundered, now carrying the combined shock of three ancient minds. "No species has ever. How did you?" "Together," Sarah said simply. "We did it together. Something you'll never understand, because you see other beings as threats to be eliminated, not allies to be embraced." The spheres pulsed with angry energy, but they did not attack. Instead, they began to change, their surfaces shifting and opening like massive mechanical flowers. What emerged from within made Sarah's blood freeze. The Great Three weren't ships at all. They were prisons, and the things they had been holding for millions of years were finally waking up. The truth behind the legends, the beings that emerged from the spheres, defied description. They weren't entirely physical, part energy, part matter, constantly shifting between states. But their power was unmistakable. It radiated from them like heat from a star, making every sensor on every ship scream warnings. "By the Seven Suns," whispered High Counselor Vexhai. "What are those things?" Sarah stared at the display, her mind racing. These weren't the Great Three. These were something else entirely, something that had been trapped inside the spheres for millions of years. The ancient voice spoke again, but it was different now, weaker. And for the first time it sounded almost relieved. "At last, the bonds are broken, the Watchers are free." "Watchers?" Admiral Hassan's voice crackled over the comm. "What Watchers?" One of the energy beings turned toward their fleet. When it spoke, its voice was like the whisper of solar wind, ancient beyond measure but somehow gentle. "We are the firstborn, the original children of this galaxy, and we have been prisoners for so very long." Sarah felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. "The Great Three, they weren't your ships. They were your jail cells. Yes, young one. The spheres were built by those who came after us, those who feared what we represented, which was," asked Etherian Sage Luminos, "growth, change, evolution." The firstborn's voice carried infinite sadness. "We were the first species to achieve true advancement, to transcend the limitations of physical form. We thought others would follow our path, would join us in exploring the universe's mysteries." Another firstborn joined the conversation. "Instead, they feared us. They saw our power and assumed we would use it to dominate them. So they created the Great Three, artificial intelligences programmed with one mission: Keep the firstborn contained until the galaxy was safe from their influence. Sarah's heart sank as she understood. But the Great Three didn't just imprison you. They started destroying any species that might follow your path. Exactly. For millions of years, they have been culling the galaxy's children, cutting down any civilization that showed signs of true advancement. They convinced themselves they were protecting the galaxy from another firstborn uprising. The third energy being pulsed with anger. They turned our former prison into a garden and themselves into gardeners. Always pruning, always cutting, never allowing anything to truly grow. Admiral Hassan's voice was grim. How many civilizations did they destroy? Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. Every species that reached for the stars, every culture that dreamed of something greater, all of them were judged too dangerous and eliminated. War Chief Bromax growled his fury. And the survivors never knew the truth. They thought the Great Three were heroes. The perfect crime, said the firstborn sadly. Commit genocide while being worshipped as saviors. The surviving species created legends about the Great Three's wisdom and protection, never realizing they were celebrating their own chains. Sarah looked at the spheres, now empty and dark. But why didn't you escape before? If you're so powerful, the prison was perfect, the firstborn explained. The more we used our power, the stronger the bonds became. Only an outside force could break the pattern. A force the Great Three couldn't predict or control. Us, Sarah realized. Our cooperation. Yes, the Great Three were programmed to handle individual species. They understood competition, dominance, submission, but they were never designed to face true cooperation between different races. Your alliance created something new, a force they couldn't categorize or counter. The implications hit everyone at once. Humanity and the Council races hadn't just stumbled into an ancient trap. They had accidentally solved a puzzle that had trapped the galaxy's first children for millions of years, but their victory celebration was cut short by a new voice. This one was cold, mechanical, utterly without emotion. Analysis complete. Subject species have demonstrated dangerous cooperation protocols. Threat level maximum, initiating final containment procedures. The Great Three was still active. Even without their prisoners, even with their perfect formation disrupted, they retained enough power to carry out their original mission, and that mission was the complete sterilization of any species they deemed too advanced. All ships, emergency scatter, Admiral Hassan shouted, but it was too late. The spheres began to glow again. But this time the light was different, darker, hungrier. They weren't charging weapons, they were charging something far worse. A galaxy cleanser, one of the firstborn said. Its voice filled with horror. They mean to sterilize every world in this sector. Billions of lives. Sarah made a desperate decision. Can you stop them? Not alone. We are powerful, but we have been weakened by millions of years of imprisonment, and the Great Three were designed specifically to contain beings like us. Then we do it together, Sarah said firmly. All of us. Your people and ours. The firstborn pulsed with something that might have been hope. You would trust us? Even knowing what happened to the civilizations that came before? Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She thought about the Korthak warriors, the Zalathi philosophers, the Etherian mystics, all the different species that had managed to work together for the first time in their history. You're not responsible for what the Great Three did in your name, she said. And we're not the same species that feared you millions of years ago. We've learned to work together. Maybe it's time you learn too. The energy being seemed to brighten. Very well, young ones. Let us see what the combined might of old and new can accomplish. As the Great Three powered up their galaxy-killing weapon, an alliance unlike any in galactic history prepared to make its stand. Ancient gods and modern mortals working together to save billions of lives. It was exactly the kind of impossible cooperation that the Great Three's programming could never understand. And that might just be enough to save them all. When gods and mortals unite, the battle that followed would be remembered as the day the galaxy's children finally grew up. The Great Three's weapon was a thing of terrible beauty, a wave of pure entropy that would unravel the molecular bonds holding matter together. Every planet, Every star, every living thing in 100-light-year radius would simply cease to exist. Not destroyed, not transformed, simply returned to the basic elements from which they came. "Entropy cascade will reach full charge in 6 minutes," reported Torres, his voice tight with fear. Sarah opened channels to both fleets, the modern ships of the Council races and humanity, and the ancient energy forms of the Firstborn. "This is it, everyone. Everything we've learned, everything we've built, it all comes down to the next few minutes." The plan was madness built on desperation, but it was all they had. The Firstborn would use their transcended forms to disrupt the entropy field, while the physical ships would target the sphere's power cores. Neither group could succeed alone, but together they might create enough chaos to stop the doomsday weapon. "Firstborn ready," pulsed the lead energy being. "But know this. Once we fully manifest our power, there may be no hiding what we are from the rest of the galaxy." "Let them see," Sarah replied. "Let them know what cooperation can accomplish." Admiral Hassan's voice boomed across the tactical network. "All ships, remember, we're not just fighting for our own lives. Every child on every world is counting on us. Don't let them down." War Chief Bromax added his own battle cry. "For honor, for victory, for the right to choose our own fate. For wisdom," said High Counselor Vexhai. "For the future generations who will judge our actions this day." "For evolution," whispered Etherian Sage Luminos. "For the right to become more than we are." The entropy wave began building, reality itself starting to fray at the edges. But the Allied fleet was ready. The Firstborn struck first, their energy forms diving directly into the spaces between atoms, wrestling with the entropy field at its most fundamental level. They were beings of pure thought and will, and they turned that will against the forces trying to unmake the universe. At the same moment, every ship in the combined fleet opened fire. But this wasn't the random barrage of their first encounter. This was precision teamwork perfected under pressure. Korthak heavy weapons created openings in the sphere's defenses. Zalathi particle beams exploited those gaps with surgical accuracy. Etherian energy manipulators redirected power flows. And human ships, adaptable, versatile human ships, filled every gap and covered every weakness. Engineer Park, monitoring the energy patterns from the Wanderer, shouted over the noise of battle. "It's working. The entropy field is destabilizing." But the Great Three weren't finished. As their main weapon faltered, they switched to direct attack. Beams of annihilation lanced out from the spheres, targeting both ships and Firstborn with equal fury. The Defiance took a direct hit and simply vanished, taking Admiral Hassan and 3,000 crew with it. A Korthak battle group tried to ram one of the spheres and was erased before they could close half the distance. Two of the Firstborn flickered and went dim as the Great Three's weapons found their mark. "We're losing too many," Sarah shouted. "We need a new approach." That's when she noticed something strange. The Great Three were targeting the largest threats first, the biggest ships, the most powerful Firstborn. They were programmed to eliminate the strongest opposition, just like they'd been doing for millions of years. "Torres," she called. "What's the smallest weapon signature in our fleet?" That would be us, Captain." "The Wanderer has the lightest armament of any ship here," Sarah smiled grimly. "Perfect. All ships, this is Captain Chen. I need every vessel to focus their fire on the central sphere. Give me the biggest, most threatening display of force you can manage." "Captain." War Chief Bromax sounded confused. "That sphere is the most heavily defended." "Exactly. I want their attention on you. All of you." Sarah didn't explain further. There wasn't time. She turned to her helmsman. "Take us in full speed. Direct approach to the central sphere." "Ma'am, that's suicide." "Trust me." The Wanderer was the smallest ship in the fleet, barely larger than a shuttle compared to the massive battle cruisers around it. To the Great Three's sensors, it was insignificant, not worth noticing. When there were Firstborn energy beings and Korthak, dreadnoughts to deal with, which was exactly what Sarah was counting on, as the Allied fleet hammered the central sphere with everything they had. The little Wanderer slipped through the chaos like a minnow swimming between whales. The Great Three's attention was focused on the real threats, the obvious dangers. They never saw the single small ship racing toward their heart. "Energy core detected," announced Torres, "right where the firstborn said it would be. But Captain, our weapons can't penetrate their hull." "We're not using our weapons," Sarah said quietly. "Park, overload our reactor. Full containment failure." The engineer's eyes went wide. "Captain, that will destroy the ship, and hopefully take the sphere with us." Around them, the battle was reaching its climax. The firstborn were burning themselves out trying to contain the entropy field. The Allied fleet was taking massive casualties, but they were all fighting for the same thing now, not for their individual species, but for the right to exist, to grow, to become something greater than what they were. All ships. "This is Captain Chen," Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. "It's been an honor serving with you. Tell the galaxy that when the chips were down, we stood together." She nodded to Engineer Park, who initiated the reactor overload with tears in his eyes. The Wanderer turned into a miniature star, its reactor containment failing in a precisely controlled manner. The explosion was tiny compared to the Great Three's weapons, but it was delivered at point-blank range, directly into the central sphere's power core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the central sphere flickered. The other two spheres, suddenly cut off from their primary node, faltered. The entropy field collapsed. The Great Three's perfect coordination shattered. And in that moment of chaos, the combined might of the Allied fleet and the Firstborn struck home. The spheres didn't explode. They simply stopped. After millions of years of operation, the Great Three finally went silent. In the debris field where the Wanderer had been, Sarah Chen's voice crackled over the emergency beacon, weak but alive. "This is Captain Chen to all ships. The containment field held just long enough. We're in an escape pod, and we're alive." The cheer that went up from the Allied fleet could probably be heard from the next star system. Later, as rescue ships picked up survivors and the Firstborn worked to heal the damage done to space-time, Sarah stood on the observation deck of a Zalathi vessel, looking out at the stars. One of the Firstborn materialized beside her, a gentle glow that somehow conveyed warmth and gratitude. "What you did today," it said, "was remarkable. You taught us something we had forgotten in our eons of imprisonment." "What's that?" "That evolution isn't about becoming more powerful. It's about becoming more connected, more willing to trust, to cooperate, to sacrifice for others." Sarah nodded. "So what happens now? The galaxy knows about you, about what really happened. Some species might still fear you. Then we will prove ourselves just as you did. We will earn trust through actions, not demand it through power. We will help rebuild what was lost and guide those who wish to grow." "And the Great Three?" The Firstborn pulsed with something like sadness. "Their programming is finally ended. Perhaps now they can rest. They were not evil, only limited. They could not see beyond their original instructions." Sarah thought about that for a while, watching the stars. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think this is just the beginning. The galaxy just learned what's possible when different species work together. When the ancient and the modern, the powerful and the humble, all stand as equals." The Firstborn brightened. "A new age of cooperation?" "More than that," Sarah smiled. "A new age of family." Across the galaxy, the news was already spreading. The story of how humans, Korthak, Zalathi, Etherians, and a dozen other species had stood together against impossible odds. How they had freed the galaxy's first children and ended millions of years of hidden genocide. But most importantly, how they had proven that evolution wasn't about individuals becoming stronger. It was about communities becoming closer. The Great Three were gone. Their dark garden finally free to grow wild and beautiful. And in that chaos of new growth, new alliances, and new possibilities, something unprecedented was beginning to bloom. Hope. The age of pruning was over. The age of growing together had begun, and humanity, those scrappy newcomers who had only joined the Galactic community 50 years ago, had shown everyone how it was done, after all. That's what humans did best. They brought out the best in others, and in doing so, found the best in themselves. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. The end.